Los Angeles, and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the mind of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, August 12th. LA Galaxy crashing out of Leagues Cup with a loss to the Seattle Sounders on Thursday night. I'll talk a little bit about that as we get you rip and roaring for the close of the transfer window and then the restart of the LA Galaxy's final 8 games in the regular season. So we're going to talk about that, some transfer rumors to sort of nail down, some that might put some money in the pocket of the LA Galaxy. And again, transfer window closing in 2 days, roster freeze deadline coming up in September in about a month. So a lot of stuff that's going to be happening to sort of solidify the final teams here before they head off into the playoffs. So a lot to get to. My co-host, Mr. Kevin Baxter, still away on the French side of the world there, covering and wrapping up the last of the Olympics. Kevin should be back actually next Monday, so we're excited that he'll be back finally. And then whenever I went through all my co-hosts tonight, everybody's either out of town or busy, so you get me again, which is good and bad. I think what we'll say is this will be a shorter show, only because there's not that much to cover, although there's some interesting little turns here, and we could probably spend a couple days if you wanted to talk about the Seattle Sounders beating the LA Galaxy, just in terms of what that game looked like and sort of maybe, I'm going to say it, a lack of intensity to sort of start that game. I mean, you can't be down 2-0 in the first 7 minutes and be like, oh yeah, we're in this game. And I don't think the Galaxy were, and I think the Galaxy sort of had that problem. So whether or not we can even attribute any of that to Micovic is certainly interesting, because is that a distraction now? Is it not a distraction? Also, I think it was completely 100% my fault. If you went back to the last show where I was with the Hammer and we were talking about Brian Schmetzer talking about the Galaxy's defense and they don't like to play defense. Or what was it? I think Rusnak said they hate to play defense, something like that. Yeah, it was my fault for defending the LA Galaxy, I guess. At least somebody was doing some defending on the night. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. I hope everybody's doing well. I know there's a little earthquake today, a little bigger than a little in some places near the Highland Park area, South Pasadena, somewhere in there. So hope everybody's okay. I've heard there wasn't widespread, damage or anything like that. But I know all those always shake and rattle and sort of get you moving a little bit. So I hope everybody's very, very good, and hanging in there for the earthquake and all that fun stuff. But let's focus in on some of the stuff that we need to. Certainly, and maybe first, if we go in chronological order, we can't talk about Wednesday morning, Tuesday, in that area, whenever Marco Reus had put on his Instagram that he was headed in the direction of Los Angeles. You had Fabrizio Romano putting out that Reus was finalizing and ready to sign deals and getting here. And so if you are Marco Reus or any footballer, I should warn you, there are a bunch of LA Galaxy aviation nerds who are ready to figure out what type of airplane you're on and what route that airplane is flying on the day, and when you will be landing in Los Angeles, being we know that there will be planes coming to Los Angeles, right? So I think it took everybody about 10 collective minutes to figure out which flight Marco Reus was on, and we were able to track that through most of the day and get you guys into a position where you could see the plane. Now, Reus did not, looks like, come through just the main entrance or the main exit whenever you exit legs at the Tom Bradley International Terminal. And I think that's one of the reasons there was no official welcome or greeting is I think he went out a side door whenever he did that and was trying to look for maybe a little more low-profile arrival as they came in and tried to finish everything up. So being that said, Marco Reus was here, but I do have to shout out a couple people, obviously. One is I always find, I think it's a uniquely corner of the galaxy thing. And I'm sure there's other teams that do it. I just think we do it better. The aviation nerds that are associated with this team and this podcast seem to come together and pull together very rapidly whenever you can figure out an aviation problem. And whenever it comes to it, we've done high-profile trackings of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. We've done Chicharito whenever he landed last time. We've done some other ones in there that weren't quite so high-profile. Marco Reus coming in is a pretty high-profile one as well. But I love that you guys know how to track airplanes. I love that you guys know how to take pictures of airplanes. A shout out to Jazz, who was driving her car on her way to Home Depot. And she knew the flight was coming in. She knew she was going to make it home in time. And so she pulled over to the side of the road and took a picture of the Boeing 747-800, which was Lufthansa's flight coming in with Marco Reus on board. So that is technically, I think, the first picture of Marco Reus right there. And then, as COG can usually do, pulls off some miracles and shows you the actual plane on the tarmac. These are not like stock photos or anything like that. These are these are the photos of Marco Reus's plane on the tarmac there at Los Angeles after it had landed, right? Same as we did with Chicharito and everything else. So some exciting times for Marco Reus to be in here. If you've really been paying attention and you've seen it on social media and some other things, last week there was a little bit of somebody standing outside the stadium, and what do you know? They're practicing putting Marco Reus up on the board. So I think, as all things are considered, the LA Galaxy making that announcement very soon. Just FYI, there's no reason that the Galaxy have to make it before the window closes. He's a free transfer, so basically they just have to do it before the September 13th roster freeze deadline. But having said that, I think everything is coming to the head here. I haven't had any special heads up or knowledge of things. I would imagine this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like we talked about last week, is usually the pretty prime spot to put that in, especially with the Galaxy having that time off now. There's not going to be a ton of news coming out as we look at the Galaxy and what they're trying to do. So that being said, Marco Reus is in LA from everything that we've been told. And he is, the Galaxy look like they're preparing an announcement for him as well. So all that stuff is headed there. All right. So that was the sort of interesting thing, and then it goes into basically the game. The LA Galaxy heading up to Seattle, taking on Seattle in the round of 32 in Leagues Cup. Remember, the Galaxy group winners, but still had to travel on the road. Just an FYI, San Jose got to host theirs, and they finished second in the group. So maybe the Galaxy should have finished second in the group, and that maybe would have put them in a better spot. Having to go to Seattle, as we talked about on Thursday, is pretty much worst case scenario for me. I don't like the turf up there. And it's not even that I think it's not even the hard, bad turf that we've seen from Seattle over the years, right? I mean, Edson Buttle doesn't score a wonder goal. If you remember him bouncing one from about halfway or like 30, 40 yards out, he bounces a ball and it goes up and over. I think it was Casey Keller who was in goal for the Sounders at that time. Maybe it was that long ago. But he bounces a wonder goal because the ball bounced up on the turf and he just sort of hit it and kicked it from the far right-hand sideline that goes over. Those are not the same days anymore. The turf bounces, but it's a lot softer. It's a lot cushier. It's a lot harder to play at. I think Seattle has one of the best home field advantages in all of Major League Soccer. Feels a little narrower. The turf is very sticky and maybe even a little spongy. And I think Greg Vanney talked about that last time. There was no mention of that in this one. But the last time the Galaxy went up there and got that 0-0 draw without Ricky Puig. And so you can look at those things and sort of put that together. But when you look at it, I don't think this Galaxy team has looked comfortable on that turf at all in any sort of real respect. And that's not even an excuse. It's just a matter of feeling uncomfortable in a place and not feeling like you know how it's going to go. I think the turf actually plays slower than grass a lot, and I was told they did water it. But for whatever reason, it seems real sticky whenever it goes. That usually slows the Galaxy down, so the transition moments for the Galaxy certainly are usually slowed down. That being said, does it matter in this game? The answer is no, it probably doesn't matter. You can see the starting lineup. Galaxy went A-plus lineup. All the way through, outside of, Aude playing in there and still coming back from injury, or Dejan Jovalic. And if you're going to talk about any of the failures of the LA Galaxy and not getting any further advancement, is the inability to get Dejan Jovalic a game in Leagues Cups. That way he could sort of be ready for August 24th as the Galaxy get ready to face off against Atlanta. So, it's one of those things that we sort of have to pay attention to as we look, that the Galaxy, got basically the bare minimum games. And I was definitely a proponent of trying to figure this out, right? Trying to get guys playing time, but also getting out of this tournament at an appropriate time as well. I feel like this game, it would have been more appropriate to get out before you had to play this game than after you had to play the game. And so for me, once you lose this game, it's sort of like, okay, it would have been nice to have one more. And I think Eric and I talked about that at the beginning of Leagues Cup. I just didn't like the fact going up to Seattle. To me, again, worst case scenario, you're playing on turf, you're playing away. That's what you don't want to do in Leagues Cup. So going up there, final score 3-1. The Galaxy are losing by 2 goals after the first, 7 minutes. So really, that's the story of this. It's you can go ahead and look at it in any different light that you want to, but if you're losing 2-0 after 7 minutes, you should lose the game. Right. And again, I sort of teased a little bit. I was joking, but this is my fault, right? Because I went out and defended the LA Galaxy. I said set piece defense was better. I said defending from open play was better. All those things. And Seattle went out there and said, no, we're gonna prove you wrong. But not only that, the Galaxy went out there with a real lack of intensity. Go back and watch those goals. It's not like the Galaxy gave these guys, and I can't say they're not open. They're very much open, but they're being marked. So you look at that as an intensity issue. I think Greg Vanney was talking about that after the game, is the lack of intensity in those moments. You can't start the game in the first 7 minutes by giving up 2 corner kicks and 2 corner kick goals. Along with, this certainly feeds into all the tinfoil hats out there. John McCarthy getting a start here instead of Novak Micovic. Micovic saying he demanded a transfer, or at least that's what was reported by Tom Bogart, that he's reporting that he wants a transfer. The Galaxy, as I told you, are very high on him. Didn't think there was going to be any issues with this. Micovic doesn't travel with the team, right? So apparently for personal reasons. I mean, listen. Is it possible that there are some personal reasons that made Novak Micovic stay in Los Angeles? Yes. Is it more probable that the LA Galaxy and Greg Vanney said, you can't do that, you can't be a distraction, so you're going to sit at home? And is it possible that by sitting him at home that it caused the distraction they were trying to avoid? But at the same time, if you're a coach, do you let that distraction, do you let that happen without any repercussions? You have a young kid who wants to play, and he was playing well. Absolutely. John McCarthy has been playing well this whole year too. I see just asinine remarks about, this is great. Greg Vanney caused this problem. It sounds like Micovic caused this problem, right? I wouldn't have started Micovic in this game if you knew it was possibly your last name and you needed to make sure that John McCarthy needed to get time. I told you already, perfectly valid reason to have Micovic not play in this game. And by the way, you wanted to be the starter in this goal, then I guess you should have played better at the beginning of the year, because John McCarthy really hasn't given you too many windows to open up that say, oh, well, this was the reason. And I know there's people out there saying, oh, well, Micovic would have got there, which is like the backup quarterback syndrome to a T. I don't know that he would have. Those are very good balls in very good spaces. I think Herculez Gomez was even talking about it afterwards. He goes, I don't think you can put those on McCarthy. It has to be on the defending. It has to be on guys like Jalen Neal. It has to be guys like Maya Yoshida. At one point, there are 2 Galaxy players on one Seattle attacking player, and they still got a clean header and scored. McCarthy stopped the second one with his face. He didn't even know where the ball was. It hit his face. I don't think it's him not coming out, because those are right on the edge of the 6-yard box, and you're going to have to fight through guys to get there. So there's no guarantee you can get there. But really, the defending on that is ridiculous. And I think that's where Greg Vanney is coming from. You put in the starters, you put in guys, you expected intensity, you didn't get it. Right now, 6th loss all season, right? We can point to these. We can talk about all of them. 2 of them to LAFC, right? A very, very good team. The rest of them, not necessarily great teams, although Seattle is starting to come into their own. We talked about it. I feel like they're going to be a good team down this last stretch, right? And that's sort of where we're trying to fit things in. We're like, is this going to be, a good stretch? Is this going to be, can the Galaxy maintain the last 8 games? Because really, the Leagues Cup matters in the fact that if you wanted it to be Leagues Cup, then they had to stay in this tournament. Right, you have to stay in if you're going to make Leagues Cup important. And if you don't, if you don't come out with the intensity that you did, and the big problem is you had guys who were not starters playing in games before, the game before this, and played really well. Quite honestly, the starters played really well. In some of those games that they played in that first game against San Jose, starters played well. Then they put the bench out there, which, by the way, still had a very good complementary piece of starters in there. You can't say the Galaxy didn't take this seriously, but you go and put an A-plus starting lineup. This is basically should be very close to your starting lineup unless Dejan Joveljic comes back, unless Julian Araujo comes back. This is probably your starting lineup, right? Where is it not your starting lineup? John McCarthy's back there. You have Miki Yamane in there, Jalen Neal, Maya Yoshida, John Nelson. You had Mark Delgado, Edwin Cerrillo, Gabriel Peck, Ricky Puig, Diego Fagundes, Joseph Paintsel up there at the 9. Listen, there's going to be a change whenever Joseph Paintsel gets to go back and work his way on the left again. Whether that's because Marco Royce is in and he's going to play a false 9, or whether that's because Dejan Joveljic is back. But I feel like Joseph Paintsel is more comfortable on the outside, on those wings. He's going to have to play really well in order to try to get that right-hand side place back. Greg Vanney's going to put whoever is hot on that right-hand side, right? Because both of those guys really like the right-hand side. He's going to put whoever's hotter, and the other guy's going to go to the other side. That doesn't mean you can't score from either side. Watching Gabriel Peck in the one goal that they said, more on the left center side, cutting in with a nice little chip finesse. Gabriel Peck is as advertised, boys and girls. Has been all season, or it has been as soon as he got acclimated, really. We talked about it, and Mike Munoz pointing out on Twitter to me as well that, Juninho really getting him settled in here. Gabriel Peck being able to get settled. I think there was a picture of him eating some instant noodles, by the way. I don't know. Maybe the Galaxy need to pay him a little bit more, but good to see that he was out there and making stuff for his own sustenance. I just thought it was an interesting meal. Maybe he's a butter noodle guy. That's okay. I don't think anybody on the Galaxy or anybody in Galaxy Land is going to begrudge him the fact that he may want to have some noodles, a couple of noodles, right? So for me, the big problem that you have here is that your A lineup went out there and they laid an egg in the first 7 minutes. Well, by the way, competed pretty nicely from there on out. Greg Vanney certainly talked about, again, a dip in intensity just before halftime as Seattle goes up 3-0. Realistically, you're in at halftime at 2-0. Maybe you have a chance. Maybe a goal scores a little bit earlier. Maybe you're right back in it. It didn't feel like that was happening, but at the same time, I felt like the Galaxy played pretty even from then on out, but you're playing a team that can play transitions very well, right? So you were playing into their hands by giving them... It's the same thing that happens with the LA Galaxy whenever the Galaxy go up. If the Galaxy score early, then teams are forced to attack. Whenever they attack, they leave stuff in behind, and the Galaxy are very good in transitions, right? That's it. I mean, Seattle had the same playbook that the Galaxy have. It was just a matter of who was going to score first. It was vital in this game for it to be 0-0 longer, and the Galaxy couldn't even manage that for 4 minutes. For 4 minutes. And I think that if you can't do that with your A lineup, and I think maybe it's a good wake-up call. Maybe it's the sort of bump that you're sort of like, hey, if you guys come out flat, there's teams that are just going to beat you. Maybe they didn't want to be in this tournament anymore. I don't know. But you can't go through the first 7 minutes and have those kinds of problems. The Galaxy then get into the same problem that I think they have, is trying to force passes. The second half was better. Thought the Galaxy had better control. Thought that they had better chances. All those things. But really, when it all comes down to it, you don't have to analyze this one very hard. Like some things you're going to sit there and say, oh, I'm going to analyze this. And it's absolutely going to do stuff. So you can't. It's about the first 7 minutes, and that game was over. And I think you guys felt it too. You can't do that against Seattle. You can't do that in Seattle on turf. You can't do that when you're away. So the Galaxy learned a valuable lesson. By the way, very well could face Seattle in something like the first round of the playoffs, right? And if you do, you're going to have to play a game up in Seattle. And you're going to need to you're going to need to do better than what you did. And I think the intensity will be there. I think it's a good learning sort of position for that. But I have zero issues. By the way, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with Micovic. I don't believe they're going to transfer him. I believe they're going to keep him. But you can't let him be a distraction. And goalkeepers are special. Goalkeepers think differently, act differently. They have a different way of doing things. I mean, I think there's no doubt in my mind that Novak Micovic could very well, first of all, in one play, Micovic could be the starter for the LA Galaxy. Right, I've seen it too many times over 16 years of covering the LA Galaxy. Is goalkeepers break an arm and all of a sudden, somebody else is starting. Remember when Dan Kennedy was the goalkeeper for the LA Galaxy and ended up pulling a hamstring in the first game and then basically never saw the field again? Do you guys remember that? This is where you're at with John McCarthy and with anybody who's a starting goalkeeper, especially when you have a guy like Micovic right behind you. It's very clear, just like Dejan Jovalic. It was clear that Dejan Jovalic was going to be in the future of the LA Galaxy, and it was about him finding the time, getting developed, all those things. Now it's up to Micovic. We know that he could very well be the starter come next year, and he could be the starter at the LA Galaxy for the next 3-4 years. And I understand the impatience, but you do not want to torpedo a season the way that Micovic could possibly be doing with what he's trying to do right now. You don't want to be a problem on a team that is a successful team. The Galaxy paid a lot of money for Micovic, and so I think that limits the fact that they might just transfer him. But having said that, you could be walking into problems here if you're Micovic. And maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he wants out. Maybe he doesn't like Los Angeles. Maybe he doesn't like the coaching staff. Maybe he doesn't want to live here. He doesn't like the weather. He doesn't like the food. He doesn't like any of that stuff. Maybe he wants out. And that's up to Greg Vanney and Will Kuntz to figure out, right? Because the last thing you want is a guy who doesn't want to be here. Now, if you don't want to be here, that's different than saying, I want to transfer, or I want to play, and if I don't play, I want to transfer. Those are different things. And so you have to be crystal clear about what Micovic wants from this. Does he want out of Los Angeles? Then you move him. And by the way, the window's still open in plenty of places, so it's not like something you'd have to do right away, but it does put the Galaxy at a disadvantage. Again, one play away, you want Micovic on that bench to come in if McCarthy, one, hits cold streak, two, gets injured. Because I think it's a coin toss right now. It's an absolute coin toss. You can't look at Micovic in 2 games and project that over all the games that we've sort of watched McCarthy play this year. But I'm telling you, I don't see a huge separation between the two, and I know the Galaxy are high on Micovic. Guy is just waiting for that time to come out and be that starter. So it's a touchy situation, I think, and it's how the Galaxy handle it. Because, again, he can't become a distraction. And if he's going to be a distraction, you have to move him. You have to get rid of him. And that's like immediately. So that's something that you have to watch with this Micovic situation. I think it's a super delicate situation right now. Probably more so because of the result in Seattle, right? McCarthy got his game in there, and now the Galaxy are 12 days away from an August 24th match against Atlanta United, and I certainly expect that it's John McCarthy who starts that game. But if he hits a cold streak, I think Micovic is right on his heels. I think Greg Vanney has to decide what's best for the club, and when that happens, there could be a rapid change real quick. But that's if Micovic can just bide his time, because I really do think that Micovic you're going to see him as the starter next year. I think it's progressed to that point. And so you can go into the offseason with him as the starter. You can go in and build up your goalkeeping ranks with him as the starter, and you build and rank that around, right? I don't know that the Galaxy look more comfortable with Micovic than they look with McCarthy. I don't. And certainly the record proves that wouldn't be the case. So we have to watch this situation, though. I think it's a lot more delicate than even I thought it was going to be. But with him not making the trip, I think either that's a sign that you thought he was going to be a distraction, but by leaving him at home, was he more of a distraction? Again, I think I've rephrased that again. But you have to be careful with this. So just something to watch as we continue on here. One of the things I want to remind you is that we do have a live show coming up on August 24th. This is a Pups at the Pitch game. This is a great chance to bring your furry friend. And Purina is putting this on. Purina has asked us to do a live show in Galaxy Park before this. The gates for that are going to open at about 3:30. So plan on being there earlier. I think all of the co-hosts. Hammer will be there. I believe Sophie will be there. Alex Ruiz will be there. Kevin Baxter will be there. We'll all be hanging out until basically about 5:30 whenever it's time for us to do a live show. And then we're going to do about a 90-minute show to get you ready for that. Maybe a little earlier, start a little earlier in 5:30, but I'll give you an exact time. We're going to have special guest AJ De La Garza with us and perhaps some other special guests in there as well. So we have a really fun live show coming up for you. We're going to have some giveaways. I have some hats that 1-2 Threads gave me, so maybe we'll do some giveaways on those COG hats. We'll find some other things to give away as well as we get up there, possibly some tickets and some other things as the Galaxy go about, but we're really excited to have you. And I was talking to AJ a little bit about it, and he's excited to come on too. So I'm excited that we can bring that to you and think I think we can have a lot of fun. So plan on that. You don't have to have a dog in order to do it. But if you want to bring your dog down to Galaxy Park, you can. And we'll be down there doing a live show prior to the game. And so sort of like a little pregame show. We'll do about 90 minutes worth of talk, and then we'll get you out of there in plenty of time for you to get to your seats and all that fun stuff. So I hope everybody was there. Or can be there for us. Let's see. Let's get to some super chats real quick. John, $5 super chat. First time, long time. Thanks for the shows. John, thank you for you, and thank you for that first super chat. Certainly appreciate it. Ben, $5 super chat. Micovic was better on corners. We need to make him goalkeeper number one. Maybe. I would say that it was more on defense than it was on goalkeeping. But lots of people disagree with me. I'm usually right in the long term, though. Just remember that. $2 super chat from Charlie. 8 games left. How do we properly integrate Royce in? You don't need to. I mean, one is, yes, there is going to be some adjustment period. He's going to probably play in most of those games, I would imagine, at some point. Whether or not he makes it for the August 24th game and sort of gets in, I would imagine he's fairly ready to go, although he's sort of in his off season, but you're not asking him to come in and start, right? And so I think as you build towards the playoffs, he's going to get more and more time, but for the most part, you're going to be bringing him into that second half and letting him sort of perform down the stretch in the second half. So it is one of those where we can sit there and say, hey, the LA Galaxy don't necessarily need somebody like Marco Royce, but they probably also need that veteran presence that gets to be put in there. So yes, they do. But I think that because you have a veteran like Royce, I think you're going to see that he's going to be able to integrate in fairly easily. I think he'll understand everything that goes on. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Let's see. I'm trying to say. Oh, here Alex says another not so fun fact: in McCarthy's last 5 games before Leagues Cup, we conceded 9 goals. Josh, would that not be considered a cold streak? We can't blame our defense for all those goals. Yes, you can actually, Alex. In fact, I can very easily blame defense for a lot of goals. By the way, most of that isn't even the defense's fault. A lot of that is the midfield's fault. How many of those goals were off of bad back passes? How many of those goals were on stupid giveaways in the center of the field? We've seen the problem. Goalkeeping has not been the LA Galaxy's problem. You guys want to make it that because you saw a flash of the backup quarterback. Again, this grass is always greener on the other side. And so you guys want to make it about goalkeeping. The goalkeeping hasn't been the problem for the LA Galaxy. As a matter of fact, the goalkeeping has been excellent, both by John McCarthy and Micovic whenever they come in. So no, it's yes, you can absolutely blame those goals on defense, and on most of it would be midfield. And so those are the big problems the Galaxy have. Cerrillo not tracking back, or it was Brugman was one of those goals where he just he tried to do a fancy pass to Ricky Puig that was intercepted. You going to blame the goalkeeper on that? No, the Galaxy midfield has slipped a little bit, and it certainly has as they were trying to integrate some things back in. And it certainly is because I think you don't have guys like Brugman in there and you don't have just some of that real consistency. Having said that, again, I can point out the Galaxy have lost 5 games in the league this year. 5 games. You can count them on one hand. 5 games. So you can't say that there's been a problem this year. The Galaxy have the sixth best defense in Major League Soccer. The Galaxy have one of the best offenses in Major League Soccer. I'm not saying things can't get better. I think that Micovic is going to be a really great goalkeeper. Just don't try to shove him in and try to change things right now. Let this play out. You guys panic. It's like, I feel like some of you never had the girl who was like, well, I'm going to leave you. Or maybe you had a boyfriend who was like, I'm going to leave you. And if you're confident in what you do, then you say, okay, well then go. And Greg Vanny looked at Micovic and said, listen, we think we're going to be together for a long time. We think we have a good relationship. I think that you're being a little ridiculous right now, so I'm going to let you sit out and chill out for a little bit. That seems like what's going to happen. It seems like the marriage will be fine. This is just a fight. All right. So, again, don't make this a goalkeeping problem. All right. Make this a midfield problem. Make this a defense problem. The Galaxy haven't had a goalkeeping problem this year. All right. So that's where we sort of sit with the LA Galaxy now. Just 8 games remaining, and I think the sort of idea with Royce would be to bring him along and put him in there, right? You can absolutely put Marco Royce into any of these situations, and I don't think he's going to be, over his head, out of his depth. I do think he's going to have to learn the league. I think he's going to have to understand the intensity. Not saying that it's more intense than the Dortmund match, than any of the Bundesliga matches. That's not it. But it's different. It's a little more physical in a non-technical way. I always think the Bundesliga is physical in a very technical way. The game plans are different. There's as people, as outsiders have come into this league, they've sort of said it's you can see everything in this league, right? There's not this dominant style of play in the league and everybody tries to play this way. There's a million different ways and a million different people trying to do a million different things. There's 30 teams in the league. You're trying to learn all of those things. But for Royce, he's got, 4 home games, 4 away games that he has to go. By the way, 4 home games, 4 away games. That's it for the LA Galaxy in the regular season. And then it's off to the playoffs. Soon enough, we're going to be tracking whether or not the LA Galaxy have clinched playoff spots. That's where we're headed here fairly rapidly. League doesn't return until August 24th. All right, so August 24th will be the restart of the league. That's when everybody will jump back into this, and we'll get to watch as the games get quickly played out. Basically, what that means is the LA Galaxy will have 8 games, and a lot of other teams will have 9 or 10 games remaining in the league from here on out. So it's good in the fact that the Galaxy have already played some of those games and already put wins in the pocket. And I think that that they're gonna benefit from that. But there are going to be teams who can close gaps with just by winning games. LAFC is one of those. You would expect that LAFC would be able to lap the LA Galaxy. They have 2 games in hand coming in, right? So that's one of those. Look at the points per game. LAFC has the higher points per game, 1.96. The Galaxy in first in the Western Conference at 1.88. So the Galaxy would drop to second in points per game. I think that's where you're going to look. RSL trading off some of their big pieces, getting another piece in. They're taking a big risk, a big gamble here down the stretch, but they think they're close. And I would imagine that the deal they made, I think it was Gomez who they sold for a whole bunch of money. But they said that, it was a deal that was too good to pass up, but that's them 44 points, 5 points south of the LA Galaxy, having played 1 less game, and they're moving one of their best pieces, one of their best players to take the money. So again, you look at that and you say, okay, so where does Salt Lake going to put in? Colorado's not that far behind, but Colorado's played the same number of games as the Galaxy, right? And I don't think Colorado scares. There's one team on here the LA Galaxy haven't figured out so far at all this year, and that's LAFC, and it hasn't really been close yet. So that's going to be their hurdle, and that's going to be their speed bump. And they have Olivier Giroud coming in and playing and starting in their, or at least playing in their next Leagues Cup game, right? So they got better. That looks like where the Galaxy are going to have to go through. Vancouver's still in this, right? Houston's in this. Seattle, we talked about them in 7th. So watch how this plays out with this schedule as it goes down. The Galaxy playing against Atlanta United on August 24th. That'll be a 7:30 p.m. kickoff time. Again, we have the live show for that. That's Pups at the Park. And then we go into the schedule where the Galaxy will go away to St. Louis. Listen, St. Louis hasn't been good, all right, but don't expect that to be an easy game. Then it's the 9/14 game. The LA Galaxy will be hosting LAFC. Is this the first time, they get one over on LAFC? And if they can, how does that set them up for the playoffs? Is there now some doubt in LAFC's mind about what the Galaxy can do? And if LAFC win that game and sweep the Galaxy, sweep the season, right, from the LA Galaxy this year, what does that do if those two teams meet in the playoffs again? Does LAFC have the mental edge? Does the Galaxy feel like there's a chip on their shoulder? How does that play out? You have the Portland Timbers, a game away at Portland Timbers. That's on turf. That's not a fun place to go. You don't want to play that game. You're going to 4 days after you played, in El Trafico. Then the Galaxy will host Vancouver, a difficult team to play against this year for sure. A game the Galaxy should win. You look at all the Galaxy's home games coming out, and that 9/14 game is the biggest question mark about whether the LA Galaxy can win out at home. Adding another 12 points from home would be a huge, huge jump for the LA Galaxy and would probably lock up first or second from those home games. What you do in those other games, scrabble some points together, maybe steal a win here or there. Make sure that on 10-19, you don't have a lot to play for. All right, because you're going to be away to Houston. That's not something you want to do, but that's where you're going to have to end the season out, is away at Houston. And then we'll get into all the fun stuff that we see, which is we'll look at Fan Appreciation Day and what the Galaxy do in the last game of the season, and sometimes those records aren't too good and you don't want to do it. So let's see. Saucy Vader in there, $2 super chat. Any Garces injury updates? Not yet, right? Not yet. It's I don't think you should worry about that. It's just that that's not on the top of anybody's priority list right now. And the Galaxy are going into basically regen and getting everything up, right? And so now you're going to start seeing some of those guys come back and what you can do with those guys and how that plays out, right? So I think Garces, I don't think it was a long-term injury. So I think that there's a good chance that we will see him at least in fairly close to the August 24th game, being close to coming back. And I think we're all excited to see him come back too, right? There's another argument, whether or not Garces is a guy who you can go ahead and put in there for Neil, and whether or not you're going to play him down the stretch, and whether or not he's going to start. Yoshida, whether or not he's put too many minutes on his legs this year, whether or not he's tired. There was a reason that he wasn't playing a whole bunch in the Leagues Cup games, was to try to give him some rest and sort of come back. So maybe a little slow to start back up, right? So to me, looking at what we saw in Leagues Cup and everything else, I think the Galaxy got almost what they were looking for out of it. Again, if you win that game and you have one more game, I think that was sort of the max where you wanted to be in there. But that being said, now it's very clear there's no distractions. You have nothing. Well, as long as Micovic doesn't become a distraction, there's no distractions there in terms of what you're trying to do. That the Galaxy now are focused, and this has to be this has to be building in intensity. By the time you hit those last 6 games, you're playing every game like it's a playoff game. And if you get a chance to shut things down early because you've been able to blast opponents, then that's what you need to do. The teams that are able to rest down the stretch while still winning games are going to be in the best shape for those playoffs. Although there's always that argument that, hey, the team that barely scraped in and was like hungry for everything knows the intensity of the playoffs. Greg Vanney said something where he said, the last 10 games is where it's really important. And it's especially important whenever you're where the LA Galaxy are, which is the top of the Western Conference. The last 10 games, now you're 8 games in. Your last 8 games have to be your most intense, have to be your most important. Everybody who brought somebody in this transfer window has to get them acclimatized and ready. So if you had a bad team and you're bringing in guys to make your team better, that's great, but you have a limited amount of games. You have a third of the season if you have 10 games left, and a little less than a third. And that's not a lot of time. If you're the LA Galaxy who already had a good team, you're adding someone like Marco Royce, you have a little bit more leeway in there that says, hey, you can get him acclimated into a team that's already playing good. It's usually easier for guys to come in and play with teams that are playing well together as a unit. We didn't see a lot of that against Seattle, and so you're hoping that readjusts and comes out. All right? The LA Galaxy 100%. And let's talk about the philosophy for a second, because we have to talk about something else. Let's switch this up just for a second. We're going to come back and talk about LA Galaxy philosophy on spending and why they spent early this time, because I see it in the chat room and I think it's important. Fabrizio Romano says that Julian Araujo is leaving Barcelona. He's flying to England in order to join Bournemouth. 10 million euros, no buyback clause, no sell-on clause. That's for Barcelona, no buyback clause. That's for Barcelona, no sell-on clause. Julian Araujo going to Bournemouth. Once that is official, the LA Galaxy do have a sell-on clause with Barcelona. So once money changes hands, the LA Galaxy will get paid again. And I think it was something around $4 million was the original buy for Julian Araujo for Barcelona. The LA Galaxy will take part in this 10 million euro purchase here. And that, I don't know what the percentage is, but if it's 10%, it's $1 million, right? If it's 20%, it's, a little over $2 million. And so that's significant. Is it significant enough for the LA Galaxy to bring in another player? Possibly. And I know we've seen rumors about the defender from Boca Juniors as well. I don't know where to put that yet. I've asked around, but it is extremely busy around the club right now, as you would imagine. This is what happens. during this time, during the window closing, final decisions being made, pieces being moved, all that stuff. And so I'm sort of waiting to hear what that means. But I can confirm the LA Galaxy 100% have a sell-on clause with Barcelona, which means the LA Galaxy will get paid millions of dollars, I would imagine, even if it's 10% or 20%. I don't know. Maybe the Galaxy have a 30%. They're going to get $3 million. So they sold them for $4 million. They're getting another $3 million. That's $7 million generated off of somebody like Julian Araujo. The other part of that is sort of philosophy on clubs that sort of blew my mind, because I'm so embedded with Major League Soccer so much that like I just focus on that I forget to look outside the other leagues. But the fact that Barcelona buys somebody for 4, sells them for 10, and then they net $6 million, and they do that with guys all day long. They have 40, 50 guys who they're able to go and move and transfer and put onto different teams and move different ways and loan out and do this and that, because they know that and let's be very clear, Julian Araujo played well on his loan and was coming back to Barcelona, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to use you. Julian Araujo is benefiting from the fact that his name is attached to Barcelona right now. Right? And the Galaxy are benefiting off the fact that Julian Araujo had Barcelona next to his name, right? So the fact that there can be development in this way is, I think, exciting for Major League Soccer. But looking at what the LA Galaxy could do, remember how I said that sometimes you have to develop players for the Galaxy too, for Ventura County FC, for the academies. That you have to develop them to sell them, right? It's not that you're going to use them at the LA Galaxy. You need to sell them before they get even to the senior team. Whenever they're playing for Ventura County, or whenever they come up to the senior team and they make an impression and then you move them. Johnny Perez is one of those that looks like it's a really interesting move, right? We can sort of track that. But you have to develop players to sell sometimes. And Julian Araujo now has played very well for the LA Galaxy, was purchased by Barcelona, went on loan, came back, now off to Bournemouth, and it looks like that deal's going to close, and that's going to net the LA Galaxy even more money. So 100% can confirm the LA Galaxy have a sell-on clause. The sell-on clause that Fabrizio Romano is talking about here is Barcelona. Barcelona did not put a sell-on clause as part of the deal with Bournemouth. So it's a straight-up sale. And that's what it is. That could be big for the LA Galaxy. So waiting to see where it is, right? Waiting to see how that comes in, and waiting to see when that money can be spent. Because, again, central defender. And I think you're looking at possibility of Maya Yoshida possibly coming back next year, Maya Yoshida possibly not coming back next year, Martin Cáceres going to be gone next year, I would imagine. And so who are your starters? It can be Jalen Neal. It can be, Amiro Garces. It could be those guys. But I think that the Galaxy are also going to still make sure they have somebody who's a little more mature in that center back position as well, to go along with some of the youth and some of that experience. All right. And so the Galaxy, going back to their philosophy, was, I think, smartly looked at how Leagues Cup was set out. And Greg Vanny was even mentioning the crowd, because somebody was asking about the crowd in Seattle, and I imagine they were asking why it wasn't very large. And Greg Vanny says it's clear that Leagues Cup is still in progress. We're still trying to figure out what Leagues Cup is doing. And the schedule for that and everything that goes on. Well, this year, the schedule for Leagues Cup basically means it's happening 2/3 of the way through the season. That means MLS went and moved their transfer window where it normally is, but front-loaded all the games, which means you're getting your transfer window, your summer transfer window comes in 2/3 of the way through the season. So if you're thinking about how you want to do this, and the Galaxy knew that they needed to have a good start to come out of the gate, the Galaxy knew that they needed to make up for all of the bad play that was last year, and so they knew that they wanted to put money into this team in the front end. And they went out and they got guys like Gabriel Peck. They got guys like Joseph Paintsil, right? So they went out and made those moves, along with moves that they made last season. Whenever you look at guys like Diego Fagundes, Edwin Cerrillo coming in, they spent their money up front a little bit, and then are now and were hard up against the cap. When you look at that, wouldn't it be smarter to spend all your money when you know that you're not going to be able to spend any money until 2/3 of the way through the season, and now everybody else is going to have to adjust and try to figure out what their best team is with 10 games left? It makes a little more sense to me to definitely front load this season. I'm not saying that's what they'll do next year, right? But I do think that there's some real interesting moves that could happen in the offseason. One of them, maybe, this is spitballing, but looking at Ricky Puig. If you have Marco Reus on a 1.5-year contract, you basically have a pretty good replacement for Ricky Puig if you wanted to sell him and make a whole bunch of money. And then you go out, you open up a DP, and you could use that money to do other things, right? So it's I think it was the correct decision, especially for the LA Galaxy. The problem is now that you're basically watching people go out and get some big names because they're available, and you're not because, well, having said that, the Galaxy are getting Marco Reus on a TAM deal. I don't know, man. It still seems like that's pretty good movement for what you needed, but the Galaxy aren't going to make a whole bunch of changes. We talked about possibly getting in another striker, those types of things. Again, I don't think that's going to happen, not with the ability to move Royce in there, not with the ability to move Joseph Paintsel in there, not with Dejan Joveljic coming back. It feels like they have the position covered in terms of what they want to do. Not saying that won't be a position of need whenever you get into the offseason, but right now I think that they feel they have that covered. So that's sort of where I sit on that one. I think that spending the money up front, knowing that you weren't going to get a transfer window until 2/3 of the way through the season, may make a lot of sense. It may make the LA Galaxy Supporters Shield and MLS Cup contenders in a year where they probably should have been developing into that instead of actually being that, right? Like they should be more on the edge, more on the cusp of what they're doing. But having said that, right now, if you're for first place in the Western Conference with 8 games to go, I'm sorry, almost by default, you should be an MLS Cup contender. Somebody said, hey, are the LA Galaxy St. Louis, the St. Louis of last year, which is, hey, really good during the regular season, get bounced early in the playoffs and never to be seen again, and then next year they're bad? I would say no, only because I know that St. Louis was out kicking their coverage for most of that year, which was they had their expected goals were way lower than what their actual goal total was. And whenever you're outperforming that much, it shows, one, you're getting a little lucky, and two, that's probably not sustainable, and it caught up with St. Louis in the end. That being said, the LA Galaxy's expected goals have been relatively equal to what their actual goals have been scored. And so I think that gives you a little bit better understanding of how the LA Galaxy have been winning this and going this. So that's sort of where we're looking with this LA Galaxy team. You also have a team that I think adding Marco Reus to will be really interesting to see how he plays in. And again, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure there's people who want to speculate and say, and I'm just going to tell you, he's a really good player. I would expect that he integrates just fine. Could there be road bumps? Absolutely. Could be. Could you also find that Marco Reus thinks on the same wavelength as guys like Ricky Puig and Gabriel Peck and Joseph Paintsel, and that the speed of play would just get faster whenever he's out there? Absolutely. Having another guy who is a thinker out there like Ricky, an instinctual thinker, I should say, basically finding the pass that you wouldn't expect to find. I think Reus is one of those guys. So I think you're getting a next level problem solver out there. And that's maybe, if you're looking at one of the biggest issues that I don't think gets talked about enough, is the LA Galaxy solving problems out on the field. A lot of times Mark Delgado is one of the guys who helps solve the problems, who can shift over, play in a position whenever he realizes what's actually happening out on the field where they can solve those problems. Soccer isn't like American football, or isn't like basketball where you call timeout and you can sit there and you can figure out what they're doing and how to counter what they're doing. You have to figure it out while you're out on the field. You get a halftime to sort of adjust things, and I think Greg Vanney has been excellent with adjusting in the second halves. That being said, you need more guys who are a little smarter in that first half to be able to figure out how to solve those problems, and I think Marco Reus could be one of those problem solvers. All right. I think that's sort of where we're sitting right now. I'm very interested to see what this sort of next 12 days holds. A little longer than I think you'd like for the Galaxy before playing against Atlanta United, but they will open up on August 24th. We'll be there for the live show, ready to rock and roll out there at Galaxy Park. So we're excited that we'll be bringing that to you, and excited to see these last 8 games down the stretch coming to fruition. So I hope everybody buckles up for that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, all right. Anything else that we sort of had to talk about? I think we covered most of the major things. And we will have, I think right now we're planning on doing a show on Thursday night. And so I don't know what we're going to talk about, but maybe we can find some guests or something for that. Certainly you don't need me to hear me talk about it again. So I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. We'll see you on Thursday night and sort of talk to you about any of the other news that pops up for the LA Galaxy. Let's see if we can talk to some people at the LA Galaxy and figure out what sort of is next down these last 8 games for the club. So I think that does it. So if you are looking for me on Twitter or X. It's at jguesman, at Galaxy Podcast. Head on over to cornerofthegalaxy.com where you can see the website there. All of our shows are there. Or head into any of your podcast programs and you'll type in Corner of the Galaxy and find us there. So I'm excited to sort of see where we can take this down the next 8 games. And I'm excited to do some playoff games. All right, that's where we're headed to. That's the next watch that we're going to put out is when the LA Galaxy will clinch that playoff spot. And hopefully it's coming sooner rather than later. All right, I think that about does it for me. I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day, wonderful night. Hope everybody's safe after the earthquake. And I can't wait to see what the rest of this week has in store. Maybe a Marco Royce announcement. Wouldn't that be nice? We'll see if that can happen, all right? So for Mr. Kevin Baxter, who is still away in Paris with the Olympics, but we'll be back soon. I'm Josh Patrick Guesman. You've been listening. You've been watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.